Thumbs up, so I guess we can get started. Good morning, everyone. We're here today to celebrate the reopening of the San Francisco First Responder Museum, formerly known as the San Francisco Fire Department Pioneer Memorial Museum. So I want to thank everyone for being here. I'm Sheriff Paul Miyamoto, and also a longstanding board member of the Guardians of the City, and I have the honor and privilege of being your MC today as we go through this program. So thank you all for being here, and it's really great to be back in person, standing here like this in front of a museum where we actually get to go and experience firsthand, live and in person, the artifacts, the pieces, the apparatus, all a part of the rich history of first responders and public safety here in San Francisco. You're in for a real treat. The board members and the Guardians of the City have put time, energy, and commitment into preserving the pieces and getting them all set up for display. So after we go through our program and have all of our speakers speak, I'd like to invite everybody to come in and experience it. It's a little small, but now that we have some COVID restrictions lifted, we all have the opportunity to go in there and share this experience together. And as you all know, or some of you might not know, this museum has been around for 54 years now. I actually live right down the street, and when I was growing up, this was a place we'd walk to just to share in the experience. I wasn't hired as a firefighter, though. I moved on to other things. But it's an honor and a privilege to be a part of public safety, and I also believe that this experience, this First Responder Museum, highlights the fact that all of us involved in public safety work collectively and together in keeping the community safe. And it speaks to the fact that we have grown from, in a fire station, having a museum dedicated to not just fire, but to all of us involved in public safety. So please enjoy the experience when you have the chance. And as I say public safety, I recognize the many members of public safety here in San Francisco, all of us from the sheriff's office, the police department, the fire department, the Department of Emergency Management. We're all here from the mayor down with a commitment to public safety, and I thank everyone for being here. And as I mentioned earlier, the First Responder Museum wouldn't be here if not for the hard work of the Guardians of the City. And we have here at our dedication the chairperson of the Guardians of the City, retired San Francisco Fire Department Captain Jim Lee. It takes a lot of passion and commitment. Yes. It takes a lot of passion and commitment to pull something like this off, especially because all of this is done without public funds. All of this is done on the beneficiaries and the donations and the support from the community for the group. And he's worked for many years to preserve our city's storied public safety history, and also helped to produce both the 1906 Earthquake Centennial in 2006 and the Fire Department's 150th anniversary in 2016. So I'd like to welcome to the podium right now, Jim Lee.
Thank you, Sheriff. That was a great introduction. Mayor London Breed, Supervisor Stefani, Sheriff Paul Miyamoto, Chief Bill Scott, Chief Nicholson, Director Mary Ellen Carroll, command staff from all our emergency response agencies. Distinguished guests and friends of our emergency responders, welcome. I'm James Lee, Chair of the Guardians of the City, a retired San Francisco Fire Department captain. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the grand reopening of the San Francisco First Responder Museum. 58 years ago, Chief William Murray stood at this very spot and dedicated this museum forever to preserve the rich history of the San Francisco Fire Department. He knew back then that to move the department forward with new ideas and innovation, you must preserve and respect your past. Guardians of the City exist for that very purpose, to preserve the heritage and history of San Francisco's first responders, which is over 170 years when you include the San Francisco Police and Sheriff's Office. We gather here today, May 11th, by no accident. The Guardians of the City staff have been working tirelessly to introduce exhibits and displays of both San Francisco Police Department and Sheriff's Office to coincide with the National Law Enforcement Appreciation Week. I will let our fine sheriff and police chief comment on that later. For those of you who have not seen our little museum, it is in fact tiny. We are literally bursting at the seams with artifacts, photos, antique fire apparatus too numerous to display in the small museum. There are over 14 other fire engines that cannot be enjoyed due to our space limitations. Guardians of the City has a very ambitious goal of opening a larger museum and event center. Here not only can we properly share our rich history of public service, but we could train our youth in disaster preparedness, expose them to public safety career opportunities, hold first responder promotional ceremonies or graduations, and be self-sustaining via an income-generating event center. I invite you to meet our board members here today that can speak to our future dreams. For now, we celebrate the end of our 2 years of being closed and want to welcome you to see the new displays and showcase artifacts and photos from the San Francisco Police Department, San Francisco Sheriff's Office, and for the first time, EMS in San Francisco. While there are many to thank today for this, to get this grand reopening, I'd like special attention and special thanks to our board members, Mike Andrzejczyk, Jackie Martin, and Jamie O'Keefe. And I would be remiss if I didn't give a special, thank you, to give a special thanks to Station 10, who always responded to our aid for help. So I'll turn this back to the sheriff, and I'd like to thank you all for coming and enjoy your day. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. And as you acknowledge the members of the Guardians of the City, I do want to point out that to my left here, I was remiss to mention that these aren't firefighters that haven't spent any money from their uniform allowance. These are actually people wearing some vintage uniforms and members of the board for the Guardians. So I wanted to acknowledge that they're standing here with you, living the history. The next speaker, I believe everyone knows very well. Born and raised here in San Francisco, she has a very interesting history herself. As the 45th mayor, she not only admires and respects our history, but continues to live it by dazzling us every April 18th at Lotta's Fountain with a period costume that seemingly outdoes the previous year, every year. Please welcome our mayor, Mayor London Breed.
Thank you, Sheriff. And I would have dressed appropriately for the occasion today, but back then, women weren't necessarily mayors at the time. So there's a new day and a new trend to set. And when I think about the fact that over 170 years ago, when some of the first volunteers started the various police and fire departments because of a need here in San Francisco to protect the public in a number of aspects, they did so because they had a desire to serve. They had a desire to help. And in fact, that has not changed much in terms of the men and women of our various public safety departments. Many of you here today, I know, stepped out on faith in these various agencies, whether it's the police, the fire, or the sheriff's department. It's because you wanted to serve the public in this capacity. And what I want to express today is, of course, an appreciation for the preservation of the history of what these various departments represent. But more importantly, I want to appreciate and thank you for your service and carrying on the legacy of what now exists for San Francisco, especially as we come out of this global pandemic. We appreciate the fact that as first responders, regardless of a pandemic, you had to show up to work. Regardless of the challenges that exist, no matter what they are, the people who respond to emergencies in this city, they have to be on the job. They have to show up. There is no other option, and we appreciate your service and thank you so much for everything you do to support the city. We also want to really thank Guardians of the City because in preserving the history, they also realize the importance of community service and giving back and working with our kids and working to do collaborations. And I know one I can just think of off the top of my head when, in fact, I don't know what your title is with the Sheriff's Department, but you were Captain Engler for the Northern Police Station at one point, and working with Guardians of the City for the first time, building those bridges of bringing Christmas trees out to the various locations in the community and developing relationships and making sure that it's not just about doing the job or showing up in really challenging times, but it's also about connecting with the community and building bridges. That's what Guardians of the City represent, a preservation of the history, but also a desire to build those bridges. And so when we think about San Francisco and its very challenging past of what happened back then, I can't help but be so proud that when you look at the leaders of these various departments, you have a woman who is leading the fire department, you have an African-American man who is leading the police department, you have an Asian American man who is leading the sheriff's department, how far we've come in terms of diversifying our departments and really becoming a part of the fabric of what makes San Francisco so special. So today, as we celebrate the history of our first responders, let us just remember how far we've come, the challenges of the past, but also the resilience of what San Francisco is. Despite those challenges, how we continue like the phoenix to rise through those obstacles to become a better, more inclusive, more vibrant San Francisco. And the way that we're able to do that has everything to do with the people who serve and protect this city and put their lives on the line every single day. So I really want to thank you all so much for being here, and thank you all so much for the work that you are doing. And know that, especially in this upcoming budget, my priorities will reflect a need to support and uplift public safety departments in San Francisco. The other thing I want to do is really acknowledge again all the volunteers and the people who are part of Guardians of the City, but I also want to acknowledge we just had our new member of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, Matt Dorsey, join us here today. He is definitely familiar to the men and women of the police department, but we're so grateful for his service. And I also want to acknowledge the fact that a lot of this happens because of philanthropic support, and more recently, the San Francisco Police Department has been supported by Chris Larson, who is joining us here today, a native San Franciscan who supports the department and wants to improve morale and support through what we know has been a very challenging time for this department. So many people care about our public safety officials. Please do not get discouraged by what we see around social media and other challenges, because at the end of the day, the people of this city, they support you, they appreciate you, and oftentimes you are showing up at some of the most difficult times in their lives, and that means something when you have someone that no matter what is going to show up to make sure that people are okay, that they're saved, that they're served, that they're protected, and that's what public safety and what you all represent for San Francisco. We appreciate you, we need you, we will continue to uplift and support you, and we thank you so much for being here to celebrate that history and what that means to San Francisco. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor Bree. Don't step away, come back up here. We have something to present, I believe. Chairperson, yes. On behalf of the Guardians, we have this
Oh, wow.
jacket here for you. It has the Guardians logo.
Oh, and my name.
Yes, your name. Just in case you forget, that's your name, and it'll be on your jacket. Might be a little warm to wear it right now,
A little
but
tight here, but
that's
there we go.
there you go.
There we go.
Perfectly fit. But thank you for your support as well.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. That's what I'm talking about.
There you go. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Thank you again. And I do want to mention, since this is I'm going to be talking about the sheriff's office now. So I'm going to switch hats for a second there. And I have the honor of leading a very large workforce of deputies and professional staff who all contribute to ensuring safety and well-being of our residents. I don't want to forget our past, and this is a commitment to remembering what we've done and where we are and where we can still go as a department and as an agency, as a part of the public safety community. So I do want to recognize that we've had support from some of our former sheriffs as well. Some of them are here and some couldn't be here, but Vicki Hennessy, Mike Hennessy were all also very instrumental in helping us move forward as we developed and collected many pieces. Mike Hennessy, actually former sheriff here for a long-standing period of time, because he was a part of that history for such a long time, actually is one of the people now who manage our history website and who have contributed a lot of information, history, and materials to that website to preserve the history that we share here with our public safety partners. I wanted to shout out also Carl Kaler is one of our board members, former undersheriff here, and Carl and his brother Rick also were a significant part of the display that you're going to see inside today from the Sheriff's Office. So thank you for that as well, Carl. Our next speaker has a very special connection to today's event. As a supervisorial aide, Catherine Stephanie was instrumental in the behind-the-scenes work that actually formed a lot of the legislation for the Guardians of the City, working for then Supervisor, later Mayor Mark Farrell. She helped to codify the GOTC's role as protectors of public safety history. She also helped Supervisor Farrell pass a resolution that outlines our very mission today. And as a very staunch supporter of public safety, we're very lucky to have her speak here today. So Supervisor Stephanie.
Thank you, Sheriff. Yes, I was just thinking, one of the great things about being involved in public service for a long time in San Francisco is that you get to see great things like this come to fruition. And I remember in 2012 working with Jim Lee and Al Cassiato, going to different locations around the city, like the pump station at Fort Mason, and then we looked at the Oak Street location to figure out where we could house these incredible artifacts to honor what our first responders do for us. And the fact that we're here today, I think, is just a culmination of the success and perseverance of everyone involved. I do want to thank you all for gathering here today. It's nice to see so many men and women in uniform, especially for me this morning. I feel very protected, so thank you. My name is Catherine Stephanie. I am the District 2 Supervisor, and I'm humbled to stand alongside so many of our first responders here. And you are in District 2. This is one of our District 2 fire stations, so thank you, Station 10. Thank you, Chief Nicholson. And, you know, I want to acknowledge what our first responders do, starting with our dispatchers who field 24 hours a day. They field 3,800 calls. That's 1.4 million calls per year. San Francisco's first responders, the San Francisco Fire Department, Police Department, Sheriff's Office, and Emergency Medical Services have kept our city and its residents safe through earthquakes, fires, and the emergencies our communities face every single day. These departments hold irreplaceable historical documents and artifacts that reflect our history, as well as their history. The conservation of these artifacts is not just an important part of maintaining our history as a city, but celebrating and honoring the heritage of our first responder departments. The Guardians of the City recognize the important contributions and sacrifices made by those individuals who dedicated their careers and lives to ensuring the public safety of our residents. And as Sheriff Miyamoto mentioned, I have long been a supporter of our men and women in uniform. We always say you are the ones that are running towards danger as others run away. And I know, as Mayor Bree just said, you know, some of the morale issues have been addressed and have been spoken about in the paper and recently, and I know that Chris Larson's here, who's was talked about today in terms of dedicating support to maintaining that morale and really uplifting our police department. And I want to thank all those who say thank you to our police officers, and thank you to our firefighters, and thank you to our sheriffs, because many times they deserve your gratitude, and to show it is one thing you can do every day to really help boost their morale. The Guardians of the City Museum, Memorial, and Learning Center is an absolute treasure for San Francisco. This museum plays an important role to visitors and our residents, and honoring the lives of all our first responders is, of course, a worthy and important goal. Thank you all for being here and supporting the museum. I look forward to celebrating with you and looking at all the new artifacts that are stored in this wonderful location. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Supervisor. And I do want to point out, I'm starting to grow a little fond of this hat. It's very functional, especially in weather like this right now, a little more so than our patrol caps. But there is one other individual wearing this hat as well. I believe our Park Ranger Chief Murphy is back there wearing a black hat, which we didn't actually stage, but between the white hat and the black hat, we're going to have to coordinate better next time. All right. You may have noticed the fire engines around the museum, and as Jim mentioned earlier, it was Chief William Murray who thought to build this place to house our history over 58 years ago. Until today, this building served as the San Francisco Fire Department's museum. While it remains just that, we've added exhibits and displays that encompass all public safety departments in San Francisco. And I want to say on behalf of all of us, we have a shared appreciation for being able to recognize all of us collectively as partners here in a fire station. And to give her thoughts on the 54 years since Bill Murray's idea came to pass, your Fire Chief, Janine Nicholson.
Thank you, my brother, and you look cool in that hat. I'd like to see if we can change our uniforms. Greetings and salutations, everyone. Welcome to Station 10 and to the museum. I want to thank the GOTC for everything that they have done in terms of preserving our history. And I want to thank Mayor Breed for creating new history with certainly the people you've appointed, including myself. So thank you so much for creating this new history. We in public safety, as you know, whether it is our call takers at the Department of Emergency Management, my sister Mary Ellen Carroll over there from the DEM, whether it is police chief, our police officers under Bill Scott, or our sheriff's deputies under Sheriff Paul Miyamoto, to all of you, thank you. Station 10, big shout out to you all back there. Thank you for being here today, and be safe, please. And I want to acknowledge, we also have a couple of our fire commissioners in the House, Stephen Nakajo and Army Morgan. Thank you so much for being here and for your support. And former Fire Commissioner Ken Cleveland, always a supporter of the GOTC. Nice to see you as well. You know, we have a proven history of taking on disasters and of, you know, growing resiliency. And this First Responder Museum can really help to preserve that history and carry those lessons forward for future public servants and residents. And I also do want to note that next week is EMS Services Week, and I'm really grateful that we now have EMS here as well. It is such a huge part of the public safety family in the fire department and in the city. So again, thank you to GOTC and all the volunteers who work here and on this. And I'm going to get out of the sun shortly now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief. And let's think back to the Gold Rush days now. And while we're talking about that, I saw the mounted unit here, so please watch where you step as we break up to go inside. Roughly around the same time as the Sheriff's Office was founded, another law enforcement organization was formed in 1849. And the San Francisco Police Department has been our partner in public safety, providing law enforcement services here in San Francisco. To share all that has happened since that date, August 13th, 1849, I'd like to introduce my partner and friend from the San Francisco Police Department, Chief Bill Scott.
Thank you, Sheriff. Good morning, everybody. It's tough when you go at the end after following the mayor and others, but I'm going to try to say something a little bit different, but I think just as hopefully impactful to touch your hearts. You know, as I look at the artifacts and all the nice exhibits in the museum, it really goes back to reminding us what public safety and public service is all about. Because when I look at this fire wagon and look at that one, night and day in terms of what the members of the fire department had to do to protect the city during that time. Now, it might have been the best equipment for that era, but just think about how difficult this job must have been when they didn't have the equipment that we have today. And the reason I bring that up is that this museum is as great as it is, and with as many artifacts that we get to enjoy and just reminisce of our history, this job and public safety and public service is about people. And it's people that has kept this city great since its inception since 1849. It's people that push those wagons and use all of the pieces of equipment that I wouldn't even know how to begin doing the work. When I look at our vintage Ford from the police department and Guardians of the City, thank you for restoring that car because it's a beautiful car. Now, you know, riding around, and San Francisco weather is good and all that, but just think of our officers not having air conditioner. You know, I mean, it's what we have become used to, but the job hasn't always been that way. We haven't always had the conveniences of modern technology and modern equipment. And I ask that when you go through this museum or any museum that is dedicated to commemorate public service, just keep in mind that the people are what makes this happen. And I want to thank the Guardians of the City and the Board of Directors, the mayor, for her support, Mr. Larson, for your support of this police department. And also we have community members out here. I see people watching in the windows, and thank them for their support as well. And the last thing, I know with our partners here, all of our public safety partners, Director Carroll and DEM and Fire Chief Nicholson and Sheriff Miyamoto, and we got Chief Murphy and his team in the back. These are good times. These are great times. They're fun events. But watching this team of people led by our mayor in times of crisis is something special. And I've been blessed to be a part of this great city and see us at our worst times and times of crisis like the pandemic and some of the events that we've had to respond to, and see us at joyous momentum occasions like this. And I gotta tell you, I couldn't be happier and prouder to be a part of this team because it's the people that are great in this city. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief. Our last speaker comes to us from a path that took her through the Controller's Office, the Department of Public Health, the Public Utilities Commission, and finally, the Department of Emergency Management. There, she oversees the staff that run the Emergency Operations Center, the 911 Dispatch Center, as well as the EMS agency. Incredible work during the pandemic to keep us all safe. I don't think I have to introduce her because everybody knows who she is, but please welcome Executive Director Mary Ellen Carroll from the Department of Emergency Management.
Thank you, Sheriff. Imagine having to go last and you don't have a fancy uniform to wear. I freelanced with the boots a little bit. So Department of Emergency, I'm Mary Ellen Carroll, the Director of the Department of Emergency Management. We house the 911 Center and the EMS agency. I just want to say, you know, our dispatchers are the first responders. They don't have fancy uniforms either, and you don't see them out in the street. And so I really appreciate the call out. They are the first voice that a person hears on their last day. They're also, in many ways, the eyes and ears for our first responders. And I just want to say to all of my public safety partners that every dispatcher that works for me, everyone that supports them, and myself, it is our privilege to work next to you and to really serve all of you. And I also want to say to the EMS agency, which is new to DEM, they were absolutely heroes during the pandemic, working so closely with the fire department and our EMS partners, and it is also a privilege to lead them. I want to shout out to the Guardians of the City, the role that you play in keeping the memory of our history alive is so important, especially from a preparedness perspective. We do live in earthquake country, and we now have many other sort of natural disasters based on climate change that we have to face. And so every year, all the different events that you have are so important. And also you, Mayor, thank you so much for supporting what we do. Showing up to these events is incredibly important. You know, finally, I just want to kind of riff a little bit off of our chief, police chief. We have been very involved through the pandemic and for the last year in really very difficult problems, coordinating efforts around some of the society problems that we have, public health problems. And I just need to say this publicly, that every single day I see our first responders helping those who are the most helpless in our city, who are in the most need and the sickest. And that is certainly paramedics and firefighters, but it is police officers, it is sheriff's deputies, even our park rangers. What you do is humanitarian work, and you need to be really acknowledged for that. And it was really my privilege to be your partner. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Carroll. And we're almost there. At this time, though, we wanted to open up the opportunity for anyone with questions from the media on the First Responder Museum and everything we have here today. And if there aren't any, then we can get right on to heading into the museum itself. So does anybody have any questions at this time for any of the other individuals that have spoken? Just as we have done with many of the resources for the city and county in Golden Gate Park, this is free. So nobody has to dig into their pockets to go inside with us today. But they can make a donation, yes, absolutely. And that is how all of us here keep going with what we have, and that's donations and support from community members like Chris and from other people throughout the community, from first responders themselves who donate not just their time, energy to the job itself, but donate to things like this as well. So I wanted to say on behalf of all of us here today, all of our speakers, all of us that are present as members of the law enforcement, public safety community, all of us that have been a part of the growth of this organization, I want to thank you all for being here and invite you all to come and enjoy the museum at this time. So thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. One more thing. Sorry, I'm being told. If we could have one group photo for all of the people here today that have spoken and all of our members. Yeah.